Good morning, good people. We want to discuss about perception and sensation, but first we want to look at some basic terms that are used in sensation and perception, as well as some just minor factors which also affect perception before we look correctly inside perception and sensation. Okay, so by the end of the lesson, one is to just to be able to define such terms because they're going to be so much present when we go through sensation and perception, but more specifically, looking at perception, such terms are going to be so much being encountered. So we want to define what perception is at first. So perception is the process whereby the brain tends to interpret some certain sensations, giving information order, meaning, and it takes into account experiences stored in our memory, the context in which the sensation occurs, and our internal state, in brackets, our emotions, motivations. It is the process of forming hypotheses about what the senses tells us or tell us. For example, if we look at the example which is written right here, hearing sounds, seeing colors are all sensory processes, but listening to music, detecting the depth of the dimension of picture, that becomes perceptual processes. And then looking at stimulus, stimulus is the source, it is a source of physical energy that produces a response in the sense organs. So the energy could be sound waves, light waves, heat, pressure, to which an organism is capable of responding. So a sensation is a response to that energy by a sensory system, and stimulus and sensation, of course, effect relationship. So stimulus is merely that physical energy that produces a response within a sense organ, such as color, it's visual stimulation, then comes the eye, musical pitch, auditory stimulation, and then comes to the ear. So the quantity of the stimulus refers to the amount of stimulus which is present. So if somebody slaps you, that's a stimulus as well. As well as another example, which is down there that you go through in the notes. Okay, now looking at the definition of sensation itself, it is the process by which an organism sense organs respond to a stimulus. The process by which an organism sense organs respond to a stimulus. It is the process whereby stimulation of receptor cells in the eyes, ears, nose, mouth, surface of the skin sends nerve impulses to the brain. After reaching the brain, they are registered as touch, sound, taste, a splash of colors. So sensation is the first process before we go to perception. So sensation, our sense organs which are written here, the eyes, nose, mouth, and surface of the skin, and so on. So that's sensation, isn't it? That process where an organism it stimulates the sense organs in a way for the response. Now looking at what that response it is any action of an organism to or in the presence of a stimulus. So the reaction could be muscular or glandular, isn't it? Yes. So with the response, if somebody slaps you or if you hear loud noise, your response is what? Reducing the noise or you get out of the room. Now, let's look at transduction. Transduction now, the process where those sense organs, sensory stimulation are now converted into energy that the mind can interpret. So it is the sequence of operation by which physical energy, example, such as sound waves and light, is transformed into patterns of neural impulse that give rise to sensory experience. That give rise what? To sensory experience. So under transduction, then we're looking at what they call threshold, which is the amount of intensity or stimulus which can be detected. But among thresholds, there are now two different thresholds that we may look into or look at along the lines of sensation and perception. That is the smallest intensity of a stimulus that must be present for it to be detected. That's absolute threshold. The smallest intensity of a stimulus or the lowest volume of a sound that you can detect. That's what absolute threshold. For a stimulus to be detected by our sense organs must become strong enough. Sight, for example, a sight, a kind of flame which is 30 miles away in a clear night. Hearing, the ticking of a watch can be heard 20 feet away under quiet conditions or at the other end of the room. A teaspoon of sugar can be detected in 9 liters of water. You see, just a teaspoon in 9 liters of water. Smell, a drop of perfume can be detected when 1 drop is present in 3-room apartment. You see, then touch, falling of a bee wing from a distance of 1 centimeter can be felt on a cheek. You see. Then looking at different threshold, which is the smallest detectable difference between 2 stimuli, or a noticeable, what they call just noticeable difference, some they call it that way. A noticeable difference depends on the value of the initial intensity of the stimulus. Example, when the moon is seen in the late afternoon, it appears relatively dim. When it is seen in the dark, it seems quite bright. Such kind of things. Another example, a person in a quiet room is more sensitive to the ringing of a telephone than a person in a noisy room. In order to produce the same amount of sensitivity in a noisy room, the ring has to be very loud. Then come to sensory adaptation. Sensory adaptation is what do you call it? Adjustment in sensory capacity following long period of exposure to stimuli. Adjustment in sensory capacity following long period of exposure to stimuli. For instance, let's say one using a toilet, you see how it is. When you are using the toilet, producing some solids, you see, by the end of the time when you leave the room, the way you respond to the smell against to the people outside the room is quite different. Then look at attention. Attention is a general term referring to the selective aspects of perception which focus so that any instant an organism focuses on certain features of environment to the exclusion of other certain features. What we call it, highest levels of awareness with selection or discrimination involved towards the certain stimuli to focus on. That's attention. And then looking from sensation to perception. So that's how it goes. For instance, with perception, it starts from the perception when the eye detects, isn't it? So our brain needs to interpret the stimuli that the mind has detected, isn't it? Yes. So depending on the two views, you can see that the picture shown 2 high-rise buildings on 2 different perspectives, isn't it? So they look the same size, but actually, in fact, they look the same size, but they are just taken from different perspectives. You see, different angles, this other angle, and then the other angle. Okay, now also looking at some other factors which affect attention and perception. There is intensity. Intensity, which is a bright color, will attract us more than a dull color, isn't it? Yes, so the power in it, the louder the sound, the more it attracts you more than the lower the sound. Unless if you're on a loud, on a noisy environment, and then you just hear something quite happening beneath. So the intensity, how bigger or how smaller it is in terms of the pressure. And then looking at the size, the larger the thing is more likely to catch our attention than something small. Vice versa, if you are among things which are larger, also a smaller thing can also tend to attract you more than bigger things if you are more around big things. Then duration of repetition, what they call a quickly running stimulus will not catch our attention as easily as one which persists or is repeated. You see how it is. So duration of repetition, the repetition also attracts or takes our attention. Then looking to emotional content, stimulus which creates emotional feelings attracts our attention more than a neutral one, isn't it? Then comes to suddenness or novelty, stimulus which all of a sudden scenarios or sudden stimulus is likely to catch our attention more easily than one we have been expecting. Something which just happened all of a sudden. A loud bang, boom, it just happened all of a sudden, so it tends to attract us. Then contrast, which refers to contrasting stimulus will attract attention more easily than those which are similar to each other. Things which doesn't go hand in hand. Let's say a very white guy dating a very black woman, if they're working together as a couple, they easily attract us more than another interracial couple. And then comes to movement. A stimulus which moves is more likely to attract attention than something stationary, or also vice versa. When things are quite moving, the one which is stationed can tend also to attract attention more than things which are moving, isn't it? So The assignment that I'm going to give you is like observe advertisements which happen on the NBC television or any other television that you see on channels. List the occasions and describe how the above factors are evident. Assess the effectiveness of these advertisements in attracting the attention of the public. So according to what have been said up here, all these factors, try to see upon all that advertisements which applies to which, and also other things which haven't been mentioned there, and then also put them on the list. Now looking at factors which influence our perception. So there are quite a number of factors. First, the context and expectation as well influences the way we perceive. Things which are involved in terms of the context, the content of the matter, and also expectation from the content also tends to influence our perception. To some instances, let's say maybe the context of the perception, let's use some advertisement that they use where they use what they call it semi-dressed personnel. You see how it is. Sometimes maybe we're expecting something else, but then the advertisement comes with semi-dressed people as well as that is now the content you see now. And then the content also, how maybe let's say it's advertising about alcohol, and then you see semi-dressed personnel, but mostly with alcohol, you find out they put females or gentlemen involved upon there, but they try to balance the genders as well. So this happens in trying to catch the expectation, and I mean the expectation and content, trying to catch different genders upon, isn't it? So the content of the advert goes along with certain gender and what they also expect. And then it influences our perception. Then it goes to motivation, things that motivates us, or it depends on what motivates us as well. You find out, for example, children aged 4 to 8, they draw pictures of Santa Claus during the month running up to Christmas. As Christmas approached, Santa Claus became larger and nearer, or more elaborated, or more decorated, costume, bigger bag than previously. You find out if you ask kids about Christmas now, they'll give you less details other than asking about Christmas around November. Motivation. Around Easter, you know, as it goes. It also influences the understanding of the content as well. Then comes emotion and perception. Like for example, things that carry emotional aspects, they also influence our attention as well, the way we perceive certain things. Let's say by a study by McNeice in 1949 cited in Barron, participants were presented with either neutral stimulus such as a table, apple, chair, or taboo words. Each of these words was presented very briefly, then for increasing length of time. At the same time, a measure of emotional response, what they call galvanic skin response, was taken. It was found that the taboo words had a higher recognition threshold more than in other words, along that what they call the galvanic skin response. Also look into that experiment or in that test as well. You find out taboo words, they tend to influence or to be highly recognized, you see. Things which carry what emotion and then influences what perception. Then comes to values, culture, and personalities. Even the way we appreciate LGBT as well, it comes from values, culture, and what? Personalities as well. And then looking into other, what they call the skills, for example, let's say they have evidence that suggests that an individual value system may induce a set. Individual value system may induce a set. Postman cited in Barron rated participants on the Alport Vernon scale of values. So the scale divides values into 6 categories: theoretical, social, economic, aesthetic, political, and religious. So the results show that words which are related to highly related value categories were found to be more easily perceived than lower rated values. So cultural prejudices have an effect upon perception as well. Pettigrew, also cited in Barron, started different racial groups of South Africans. Pictures were shown to Afrikaners. So the pictures were shown to each of their eyes simultaneously. Afrikaners tend to exhibit cultural setting that they saw all the pictures as either Europeans or African without differentiating Indians and those of mixed race from the Africans. So you find out also values, cultures, and personality also influence the way we perceive. Look into your values and cultures, culture where you come from, and the values and beliefs that you hold, and then try to examine a setting scenario and see how much culture and values influence you, and then ask another friend from different cultural perspectives and also with the different personalities, and see how much it influences the way you view certain things. So in summation, that was some basic terms and also factors which influence attention and perception. So that is the homework, or what you call it, assignment after looking at this video, some certain things that you have to ask yourself and see how much they apply to your certain lives and social well-being of ourselves. You have a wonderful day and read more.